Hi all, I'm Matt from Mountainside Arts, and today I'm going to show you how I make these amazing sunbursts. I'm going to be making this big guy and the little dudes behind me. So I've received a ton of requests on how I make the things I do, so hopefully this is the first in a series of videos. I'll be going over some of the tools, tips, techniques, and types of wood that I use so you can make one yourself at home. Or if you think they're super cool and you're like, I could never do that, then check out mountainsidearts.com and we can make one for you. Also, I'll pre-apologize for some of the shots, angles, and video editing, as this is my first video, but if you do love it, then like, subscribe, and all that kind of stuff, so I know I'm doing something right. Yeah, let's get to it. Okay, so I start with a bunch of blanks that I've processed from pallet wood. I'm making another video on how I cut these down and process them to get good planks, and I'll put a link to that video in the description. I'll take all these blanks and cut them down into the rays, but first we'll cut a few down into thinner strips because we'll need some thinner rays. Notice how I use double push sticks when I thin out the strips. You should, of course, do this too. Alright, let's cut some rays. We'll need matching pairs for each side of the sunburst, so I use this angle cutting jig that I made to cut each strip to corresponding matching angles. I set the depth of the clamps on the jig, then get the angle that I want, screw it down, and feed her on through. The trick is to get a bunch of variance in the angles, length, and thickness so it sets you up to have choices when you're laying all the rays out later. Some pieces are just a little bit too thin for that angle cutting jig, so for those ones I draw a line with a straight edge and then cut them on the bandsaw. Oh yeah, look at all those rays. But we're not quite done yet. We have to make all the rays the same length, or else one will stick out farther than the other one. So what we do is we get those angles so they match and choose the best looking side of each ray. We're looking for like cool knots and unique features, and we're also kind of looking to avoid little divots and things like that. So once we do that, we line up those angles so they match, and we'll cut a 90-degree angle on the side closest to us. This is just me cutting a bunch of those angles. You can see how I look at each piece before I cut it to make sure that the two best sides are touching each other. Alright, now we've got some rays we can work with. And on to cutting the backing. As you can see, I use a compass to draw half circles on strips of plywood. And that's just me doing the same thing for the smaller sunbursts. Then I cut everything out on the bandsaw and basically go through the same process for the sun pieces. I usually like to do the sun pieces about half the radius of the backing piece. It just seems to work out best that way. Maybe a little more, maybe a little less, depending on what you're looking for. Alright, now it's time for everyone's favorite fun game, sanding. I smooth out the lines that the bandsaw leaves and really try to do a good job on the top and the edges and stuff like that. No need to do the bottom. It's actually good to leave it a little roughed up for when you glue it on. This belt sander is actually really awesome for this job. Being the neurotic perfectionist that I am, I always go over everything and hand sand just to make sure that all the lines are out and I really get a good eye on it. I like to use the color Sedona Red for the suns. It's kind of a deep red, but not too deep, so it still kind of brightens everything up. I guess that's kind of like this song, like a super, super deep groove, but still pretty bright. Now we want to find the center line of both the sun and the backing so they line up when we glue and pin nail them together. I also like to get a true 90-degree line on here so future me is happy with past me when I put on that first center ray and I know everything is centered. You'll see what I'm talking about in a minute here. Pop, 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 pop. And of course we can't forget about the little guys. While all the other rays that make up the Sunburst are sort of like a 30-60-90 or maybe a 20-70-90 triangle, the angles that make up the center ray are equal on both of the sides coming down. And I just cut this bad boy with the bandsaw. Back to the belt sander. Here I'm just making sure everything is lined up and I don't need to cut anything off the bottom of the ray to make it shorter. Can't make it longer, but I can make it shorter. And I can also sand it. And back to the staining station. Man, it is so satisfying watching these colors happen so fast. Gluing and nailing that center ray, this is when that 90-degree line that we drew really comes in handy. Now everything starts coming together. As I start putting the rays on, I like to really vary the lengths. I'll do short skinny ones, then long fat ones, and really get just a good variability of how everything's gonna look. The real trick is what I'm doing there. You wanna get the angles right as you progress down the sunburst. We don't want to get ourselves into a bind by having too sharp of an angle or too dull of an angle. We want to make sure our bottom ray at the very end is perpendicular to that center ray. As I'm laying out the rays, what's important is that the length from the top of the ray down to the sun is equal for each corresponding ray. So I lay them out next to each other, put a little mark, and work both sides. Mark all the way across where the sun is. Then I go to the bandsaw and cut those so they're the exact same length. And I continue doing that same process all the way through. And now, the sand jam. Welcome to the staining station. I have a variety of colors and stains that I use. We won't go through every single ray and stain every one of them today, but you'll get the idea here. So I pick corresponding rays from each side, and I'm going to start with just a natural stain to kind of bring out the natural wood, and you'll be able to see some of the grain a little bit better and that kind of stuff. Don't discount a natural stain. It really brings out the grain. They always just turn out so beautiful, don't they? So now it's time to glue and nail the rays on. So I go through with a pencil and mark where each ray sits. And that helps me so I don't put a ton of glue, and I just put glue where the ray needs to go. Just a little bit on the backing and then a little bit on the ray. Then with the smaller rays, I like to do one nail in the side, and then the bigger rays that are a little thicker and wider, I'll put nails, I'll clamp it on and put nails in the back. I like to use these blue shop towels to put in between the clamp and the ray, just to protect the ray a little bit. I like to put 2 nails in the back of the bigger rays. 1 isn't enough, and 3 is just too many. for the bottom rays, I just like to take 2 planks and stain them whatever color seems like the best to go with everything else. And I put them on, and I don't worry about cutting the bottom before I glue and nail them on, because we're going to cut the whole bottom straight in a second here. Wait for it, with this straight edge jig. So I flip the Sunburst over on top of a towel to protect the face, and then I take my straight edge jig and line everything up. And I look at both ends of the bottom rays and make sure they are the same distance from where the cut's going to be. Clamp it down and throw usually 3 screws in to keep everything snug as it's going through the table saw. And just a note on table saw blade height. Your blade should only be as high as the depth of your gullet. It doesn't need to be higher than that. If it is, you'll start getting a lot of chatter, especially on cuts like that. Now all we have to do is measure the bottom, cut it to length, give the corners a light sand, some glue, a few nails, and we're set. Oh wait, can't forget about the little guys. Thanks for watching, everybody, and Cartoon Me says please don't forget to like and subscribe.